Hey, everybody, doing another episode of the Behind the Bits podcast. I think this will be my 111th interview, either 111 or 112. But yeah, we've been doing this for a little while. I want to show off my new shirt. I want to make sure that Chuck sees it. The Chuck Friday show got me through the pandemic. Used to love to watch him do the DJ thing, and it was absolutely fantastic. He's from my old neighborhood in South Bend, and when I saw he was selling T-shirts, I got one. So check out Chuck Fry. He is one of the best DJs I know. So it's just real nice to have a piece of South Bend here with me here down here in Huntsville. So that is really cool. Today, I've got to start recording. It's very important that I hit my soundboard and start recording. But today, I've got a comedian from the Boston area. It's Orlando Baxter, and he's a former teacher that just exploded on the Boston comedy scene back in 2005, and was a finalist in some of the really big stand-up contests and shows, including Stand Up for Diversity, the Boston Comedy Festival, the Montreux Comedy Festival, the Johannesburg International Comedy Festival, Edinburgh Fringe Festival. I've talked to so many people that did Edinburgh Fringe. That's so cool. And the Melbourne Comedy Festival. He made his late night debut on Conan, and he's got a dry bar special that is called Glorified Babysitter. It has over 5 million views on YouTube and over 5 million on Facebook. That's a lot of views. He also co-wrote and co-starred in the feature film Salesman, now streaming on Amazon. He is got a new special coming out that we're going to talk about. Orlando Baxter live from South High, and that's coming out on May 6th. So I'm stoked for it. As a podcaster, I got to hear it first and got an advanced copy. So we get to talk about it, and I'm going to bring him up right now. It's Orlando Baxter. Orlando, how are you?
How you doing, Scott? How are you doing,
Thanks so much for
everybody?
doing the show.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
I One of the things I noticed about your special is you've got really, really good pacing.
Oh,
I
thank you.
I've never seen somebody as comfortable and just conversational up there. It's not. There's a confidence there that I wish I had.
Yeah, yeah. No. I think I'm kind of like laid back, like in general.
Uh huh.
I think that carries over on stage, and then also, I was kind of. I mean, you watch the special. I'm kind of like talking about my life, and
Yeah.
it was like a theater atmosphere,
Uh
which
huh.
kind of slows you down a little bit as well. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
in terms of like being in a club where it's more intimate, but you can deliver the jokes faster because you're closer.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas theater might take a little bit more time.
You got to wait for the back of the room to hear the joke and laugh.
Yeah. So don't give me all the credit, man. You're making me sound real good here,
Yeah.
right?
I really enjoyed it, and I'm going to use it to teach myself to slow down because
Mm.
I just did a 10-minute spot and I finished it in 8.
Oh yeah,
And I
yeah.
know it was 10. It was supposed to be 10.
Oh yeah. Now that happens sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's weird though. It happens. You could either forget a bit, or you're going too fast, or the laughs aren't long enough. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like you anticipate a longer laugh, and you're like, yeah, that wasn't supposed to be a half a second laughter, was
Yeah.
it?
That wasn't supposed to be a courtesy laugh.
Yeah, definitely.
So I wanted to talk about the special a little bit first because it's going back to your old home school. Where did you go to school there and teach there?
Yeah. So I graduated from South High School, and then at my last, I taught for about 12 years, and my
Uh,
last 2 years before I decided to leave and do full stand up full time were at South High.
mhm.
So I honestly felt like if I didn't make that decision to go full time, I would have stayed at South for the rest of my life because just I love the school. You see me
Right.
rocking the school
Yeah.
shirt right now. Got a lot of South pride in me.
Yeah, and you could tell that the audience was really some of it was almost inside jokes, because
Oh yeah,
I mean, you made it to where everybody would understand, but I can tell that those jokes really hit because it was the folks that had been there with you.
yeah. It was a lot of my colleagues that I taught with. Just a lot of teachers in the city, man. Like that's kind of like a big part of my fan base. A lot of educators. So there were a lot of educators at this show. I did it in my hometown, in my home city, and it's in Worcester, Mass. I'm a Boston comedian, but I'm from Worcester, Massachusetts.
Okay.
Like Dennis Leary. That's
Yeah.
the other big guy out of Worcester.
There you go. And as far as how the act was, very story driven
Hmm.
and very personal, and really, I felt like I knew who you were
Hmm.
by the end of it. Is
Yeah.
that how comedy started for you? Did you start with the personal, aspect
No,
of it?
no. I was more of a writer. I didn't do too many act outs. I didn't really tell too many stories. I kind of just was like set up, punch.
Mhm,
But at some point, maybe a couple of years in, where I kind of realized like conversation for me felt more natural,
mhm.
and it felt like it. You can hide the punchline a lot better through conversation. It's harder for them
Yeah,
to tell when it's about to come because you're just having a conversation, and then
uh-huh,
they have no idea they're going down a path with you. So that I kind of like adopted that style, felt the most natural to me. And then I think because I had went to the Fringe festival for a couple of I went multiple times, and it
mhm,
was always a difficult grind but a great learning experience. And I was able to watch a lot of international comics, and a lot of them were doing like this storytelling type of stand up. And
yeah,
I remember going the second time and saying, I want to kind of like try this. And I end up trying it. And it allowed me to be a lot more patient and storytelling, kind of like, just not be as concerned with the laugh. Not saying that the special, but gave me some patience. And I think when I did this special live from South, it allowed me to put a lot of jokes that maybe people heard before into a context and
uh-huh,
into this like arc, which allowed people to know more about me. And it's not just about the bits. So I think
right.
that's why I love about this special.
Yeah. I've talked to, several comedians, from Great Britain and a couple from Australia, and there's a difference, and you've been to both places. There's a really big difference between United States comedy and UK comedy, and then Australia, from what I understand, really takes it another step to where,
Mm.
I mean, you could just sit there and talk for an hour and a half and have 3 real punchlines, and everybody's fine with it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's very different, man. But I think you can, and I've seen comedians that had like this. They can do both, meaning like their comedy would come very quickly, but it
Mhm.
was very. It was a lot of storytelling as well. Like so, like what I tried to do in this special, which is very different. Like, is I tried to combine like the both of them just
Mhm.
because of the uniqueness of the situation for me, like to do it at that high school. And probably as you know, as you watch the special, you realize how significant and how impactful this as a person, as a student, and as a teacher.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, it really came through that way. As far as writing. So when you're writing the setup punch stuff and all the stuff that comedians have to do when they start out, do you feel like it was harder to write that, or is it harder to write the story driven stuff?
No, I think it's much harder for me to write. I don't know if it's because I got ADHD or what, but it's a lot more difficult for me to just sit down and just write things just to write them. Like
Mhm.
when I try, I focus. Like I'm kind of a perfectionist, so I'll start and then I'll erase, then I'll start and erase, and I don't get anywhere. Whereas I do a lot of my writing on stage. Now, I
Okay.
feel like when you're on stage, you don't have time to criticize yourself because there's an
Hmm.
audience in front of you. So you're like forced to not be in your head. Whereas when you're
Right.
sitting down and writing, you can kind of analyze everything you're thinking about or about to write and be very critical. Where on stage, you don't have that. You're kind of people are looking at you. They're not gonna wait and be like, you know, what's he
Right.
doing now? You just gotta talk. And I think that's been very helpful to me. Like going up on stage with an idea or a story in mind and kind of telling the story and then kind of finding the rhythm and the beats. And then once I listen to it back and hear it, then I can kind of like add to it. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So you're one I haven't talked to a right on stage comedian for a while. So I want to get into that. When you are writing on stage,
Okay.
what do you go up there with? Do you have a premise? Do you have a punchline you want to get to? What's your goal when you get on stage and you're working out new stuff?
So for me, the goal is like if it's a story that I find interesting, not even necessarily funny,
Mhm.
and then somehow, you know, and I just want to talk about it a little bit because something might have been awkward or I might have felt a certain way or maybe there was a punchline that I just want to use, but to get to it, I got to tell this story.
Mhm.
And so I'll go and I think because I already know I have jokes that are like funny. So I know I can
Mhm.
like, oh, I can be very funny up front just to tell this story in between
Yeah.
and then end with funny, or just tell the story up front and know that I have funny behind what I'm saying.
Mhm.
So I guess my mentality is, all right, this is new. I really want to see how are they paying attention to it? Like because if it's interesting and maybe not so much funny, but it's interesting, then it's worth me doing again
Mhm.
because I got their attention, and that's also part of it, right?
Yeah.
You want to be able to grab their attention and like if they're holding on to my word and they're waiting for the funny to happen and I just don't deliver, I'm like, all right, I gotta find the funny in it
Yeah.
because they're on board. I just gotta be able to deliver. So I think that's kind of my mentality. The stage and I'll once I listen to it, I'll write to what I said on. I don't
Okay.
necessarily. I don't go on stage with the idea written down where me saying it verbatim. I'll have the gist of the idea, and then I just like, oh, you know. And I think a lot, like I said, I think a lot of it has to do with, you know, the ADD in me, where I just kind of, I'm like, I'm not gonna remember it if I try to
Uh-huh.
remember it. So I got to tell the story because for some reason, stories, experiences, I don't forget them.
Right. Yeah, that I really like that because that's actually what I'm moving to myself a little bit
Mhm.
more, and I made a big move from, the north to the south, and the one thing that I always did was I was always 100% ready when I went on stage when I was up north, and I decided, okay, I'm just going to throw it away. I'm
Yeah,
just going to go up with some things that I think might be okay and talk through them, and just like you sandwich it in between the stuff that is going to work. And yeah, it feels good to do that, especially when I guess you have to have stuff to start with. If you
yeah,
don't have the stuff, it's a lot harder.
yeah.
But,
It's definitely a lot harder.
yeah. So I'm gonna go back and forth as far as, different times in your life, but one of the things that really struck me was when you were talking about you had the kind of cross-eyed problem
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and wore the glasses and got picked on and things like that. That hit home so much for me because my son went through that, and
Mm,
we went through. So we went to one doctor, and the doctor said, "Yeah, I'll just snip a couple nerves, and everything will be all right." And we went to another doctor, and he said, "No, you can't do that.
yeah.
His eyes are not the he doesn't have a lazy eye. He has his eyes working independent of each other."
Yes.
Is that
Yes.
what yours was?
Yeah, it was working. One was working and one was lazy. Like
Yeah.
so one tended to like take all the focus, and the other one was kind of like didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
So it hung out by the nose. But yeah, glasses, and we couldn't afford the surgery. Mom didn't want me to do the surgery. They said that the glasses were gonna fix the eye. That's a lie. So don't
No,
believe that.
it doesn't.
Like
Yeah.
what it will do is it'll eye straight. It'll 100% keep the eye straight. But once you take them off, it kind of like goes back to the original state. But
Right.
what I found out was I had contacts in like maybe my senior year in high school, because I guess the glasses kept them straight. The contacts actually kept them straight as well. But when
Oh.
I took them out, it was the same thing. But then I got the laser eye surgery, the LASIK eye
Uh-huh.
surgery, and that kept them separate but equal. You know,
Yeah. Now, did you not have depth perception?
I don't. I just knew I could not see well at all. Like
Okay.
I was. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't. I forgot what it was exactly, because at some point when your eyes cross, you don't care about
Yeah.
all the non-essential things. You're like, that's like the main problem. So
Well, the reason why I ask is my son played basketball and
yeah.
baseball, and he was a pitcher, and
Mhm.
he didn't have depth perception. I mean, we were told he has no depth perception, and I was always wondering how he could find the basket if he didn't have depth perception. But he was out in the driveway every night
Yeah.
hitting
Practice.
hitting the threes and stuff like that. So it was just muscle memory as far as where it was. And he's had surgery since then, and his depth perception comes in and out now,
Yeah.
and it actually freaks him out a little bit because he'll be driving, then all of a sudden he's seeing 3D, and then it goes back. And
Oh yeah. No, no. So that was another thing too. I think I didn't have it. I didn't have their perception either, because I couldn't use 3D glasses. I remember like there was like
yeah,
a point in time when you would go to the movies and some movies would have 3D. It never worked for me.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
never. But
yeah.
now it does, and it
Same as my son. Yeah, my
freaks
son
me
had the
out a little
exact
bit. Yeah, it's funny.
yeah exact same problem. So growing up with that in mind, I wore glasses when I was a kid, and they were super thick, and I went through the same thing.
Yeah.
And I also, by the time I was in seventh grade, or no, I was eighth grade, I was like 6'5". So I was a giant, but I weighed like 150 pounds. So if I stood sideways, like I was invisible. And but I got picked on, bad, because the junior high and senior high were all one school,
Oh wow.
and the junior high kids were in general population, I used to call it. And the seniors didn't like I was taller than them, so they just picked on me really
Oh
bad.
wow. You were
And
hard to
and
like hide.
oh yeah, it was awful. And it seems like we did the same thing. We used humor to kind of disarm that stuff. And is that where the comedy bug hit you? Was right then when you knew you could make people laugh?
Well, yeah, I think it was like a combination of things. Like I said, I was very shy,
Mhm.
uh, and I was, unless I was amongst people that were like close friends or family. But I think my mother laughed as a mother used to be into like Benny Hill and like all this like British comedy, absolutely fabulous, and She was a big like Jerry Lewis fan and Lauren
Uh-huh.
Hardy. So I used to always love comedy, and Richard Pryor was like huge, huge in my house. Comedy albums or whatnot. So I've always been into it, and I could always make her laugh or make my younger brothers laugh, and some of my really close friends. But I was kind of very shy publicly,
Mhm.
and I think it was because I was just insecure about having these glasses, and I was unlike you. I was really small for my age. Like
Uh-huh.
when I was 16, I was 5'3".
Okay.
I'm six. I'm little, almost 6'1" now, but when I was 16, I was so super skinny. Glasses look bigger than my body,
Yeah.
most of the time. But yeah, I definitely used comedy like when I started like kind of using my humor a little bit, like in myself, and it was like kind of my like go-to thing.
Yeah, and you went to college and started doing the teaching, and
Mhm.
then, you're an adult now, and you gotta do the adult stuff and keep going. When was it the comedy came back to you?
Well, at that high school I was at, um, like I said, my personality started coming out at South
Mhm,
because they had this like TV production class where we would do like mid-morning announcements, and I would kind of like fool around with my friends in the studio and we'd joke around all the time. And you know, I changed a lot as a person. Like, I
mhm.
started getting into sports a little more, and I was on the basketball team and football team, and I was this funny guy, but I was this new kid, but everybody seemed to like gravitate towards me, and I had these great, amazing teachers. So I think with stand up kind of like it was always something that I respected all the comedians that I watched. I love shows like Kids in the Hall and
Mhm.
SNL and just any comedy really, like Eddie Murphy, whatever, whoever it was. Um, but like when I was in college, I had friends that also felt like you're quiet, kind of, but you're funny around us. You should kind of like try it. And I remember I got real drunk with my roommate and he signed us up for like a college like competition type thing, comedy. I thought it was going to be terrible. It was going to be funny. We were both drinking and I ended up winning it. But I just never, after I won it, I just was like, nah, like, oh, they were laughing. We were drunk. And I think it was just, again, when you let your fears and insecurity like get the best of you, it can prevent you from doing something that you're interested in for a long time. And
Mhm.
that's so years and years went by, but I had that one experience and I kept thinking about it. And then when I was teaching, maybe my second or third year into teaching, I decided to give it a try.
So you're doing it as a teacher. Did you just go to, like, an open mic, or was there a competition, or what did you do?
No, no, I was very smart about it. Like it was during summer break. I actually went out to LA to visit a friend. And
Ah.
while I was in LA, um, well, right before I went to LA, I went to go watch an open mic in Boston.
Mhm,
Didn't go, I just went to watch. And then I went out to LA like the next week. And then my buddy, I was like, hey man, I wanna try an open mic.
mhm.
And can you bring me to one? And I was there for a week. He brought me to three. Everything was cool. It did not go well. Uh, typical stand-up story.
Yeah.
And then but there was only like six people in there and they were all comics. So at the time I didn't know that. I just thought, oh, I needed to get this thing out of my system.
Mhm,
And on the fourth, like there was he had some other friend that knew someone else that had a show, like a real show. And he was like, hey, my friend said he'll give you 5 minutes to do some material on the show. I'm like, man, I just tried it 3 times. I'm not no comedian. What are you talking about? I can't do no real show. I can't even do an open mic. What makes you think I'm prepared for a real show? But anyways, he convinced me to do it. My friend Mike Myers, shout out to Mike Myers. Which it's a real person. It's not a fictitious like Mike Myers. He's hanging out with these crazy people. Uh, So anyways, I did the show and it went well, and the host was somebody I recognized from BT Comic View at the time, and he had asked me. He said, "Oh man, you're a good writer. How many years have you been doing comedy?" And I was like, that was validation and confirmation for me to be like, this guy thinks I've been doing it for a year or two. I thought that was a compliment, you know. So so yeah, man, like I came back to Boston the next week, and that open mic that I had attended earlier, I kept going to it, and I did that for just once in a while for a while, and then eventually you know, people started saying that, oh, you're kind of funny. And then I started getting other opportunities. And then, yeah, really like summer of 2005 is really when I went at it. But like 2005 is when I started.
Mhm. And how long did you keep the full-time teaching position before you went full-time?
I kept that for 12 years,
Uh-huh.
but I did take a break. I got the NBC for diversity
Uh-huh.
thing. It was just thinking like maybe like 2 years into comedy, I had went down to New York and stood in line with a bunch of other Boston comedians, and we did this 2 minute NBC for diversity thing. Anyways, I ended up moving on, and instead of all the Boston comics getting on the bus and going home, they all stayed with me to go to the final round that night. And I was the only one. I didn't have an agent or representation, and I was on
Uh-huh.
there with some pretty like known comedians in New York and people that I seen on TV. And anyways, I ended up being one of the two that won out of New York. And
Wow.
that maybe a month later, I was supposed to the NBC diversity thing, the finals. You go out and compete for a talent development deal for like 250 grand.
Mhm.
So I was like, man, this is it, man. I'm gonna do one of these stories. And it didn't happen. I didn't win. But I end up taking some time off of school to kind of pursue that. Like I think I took like I got permission to take like a couple weeks or whatever to do that. And then I went back to teaching, and then maybe a couple years later, uh, for a half a year, Joe Coy, who was a big mentor to me, national
Mhm.
comedian. Um, I had met him, and he had started like taking me on the road in the summer, and then for a while, like a couple of years, and then there was one year where he would ask me to go on the road for like half a year, and that's when I took a leave of absence. So I always say I taught for like 12 years, but it's more like 12 and a half years.
Mhm.
And then I ended up coming back after that because he was like, "Oh, you want to go on the tour? You want to go on the road again?" And I was like, "No, I want to get my tenure as a teacher because I didn't have enough years to. You need 10 years to teach."
Mhm.
And then once I did that, I was just kind of like, "All right, this is cool, man. I got a pretty good gig. I'm teaching and I'm doing stand up, but I started missing opportunities, but I was kind of still afraid to pull the trigger full time as a
Right.
headlining comedian with no one bringing you on the road, and you know no TV credits, no big TV credits at the time.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, that was a gamble. So that story I tell at the end with the student kind of like pushed me in the right direction as well. So that's why it's included in the special.
Right. How many times after you went full-time in comedy did you say, "This was a really stupid decision"?
It's crazy. The only time I did that, and I really didn't do it. Everything started happening when I did it. Like I
Great.
legit, the day I decided I wasn't coming back, and I remember I applied for my first comedy festival. I think during that summer when I was debating on like, damn, I should just call them and tell them I want to. It was a mistake. Tell them I'm coming back. But I applied for the Montreal Comedy Festival in Switzerland,
Uh-huh.
and I didn't expect to get that, but they picked two Americans, and I was a guy that got the opportunity to go. So that led to me going to Scotland and meeting all these international comics, and then
Mhm.
getting signed by Mick Perrin, which is Eddie Izzard's producer,
Okay.
over a producer promoter over in England, and I've been very blessed all the way up into working.
That's
So
that's great.
yeah, yeah.
Did you meet anybody overseas that kind of changed your outlook on comedy? Not just the shows, but did you meet anybody that kind of took you under their wing and gave you some good advice that you still use?
Um, I don't think anyone that took me under the wing, but I think being exposed to comedy and the idea that it can be done globally and
Mhm.
like other people in other countries, I think it really changed my mindset about stand up in terms of like it's kind of like the equivalent when you're like starting out and you're very like local and maybe some of your references and the jokes that you have are very local until you start doing more national things. Like when Joe Coy took me on the road, I was like, well, maybe the Red Sox joke isn't as great as I thought it was.
Yeah.
It's you know what I mean? So I think the same that had doing comedy in other countries had the same impact on me because it made me start thinking like, yeah, I can do this joke, but will people in these other English speaking countries understand it? You
Mhm.
know, and if they do, how do I what what do I have to not necessarily change, but how do I explain this joke in a way that they'll get it where it doesn't you still can have the funny without sacrificing it with too much explanation. Um, the internationally definitely changed a little bit more as well. So yeah,
Well, the masterful pacing, that's what I noticed first about the whole special.
yeah.
I
Thank you.
I j and I did watch some of your clips, uh, was that the Today Show? Was that Michael Strahan that brought you on, and you did a couple minutes?
No, it wasn't to I've done Conan, I've done obviously Dry Bar, Mike Huckabee show, which
Mhm.
was completely out of my different political views, but I did that show. I did that show in front of that audience, and in my head, I was like, if even if this doesn't go well, I'm gonna have something to talk about on
Yeah, oh,
stage
yeah.
from the experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like yeah, that international stuff definitely changed me in a way.
So how did Conan happen?
Conan happened. Shout out to Whitney Cummings, another national headlining comedian that kind of took me on the road for a little bit. One day she had asked me like, "How come you're not on TV?" I'm like, "I don't know," and she's like, "I may know somebody that might like you," and I think she didn't really like. Oh, I think they work for NBC or blah blah blah. I can't guarantee you anything, but I'll give them your information. So that's what
Uh,
she did. She just sent them a video of me, and within 24 hours, I got a text back from her like, "They love you. They're interested. They're gonna be called." And then that's how the introduction happened with JP Buck from Conan, who's a talent scout, and we would have conversations about like because some people think when you do Conan, you're like, oh, they just take you for your 5 minutes. He's seen a 10-minute set, and we were kind of like trying to figure out what jokes would be good for his audience or with that
mhm.
audience on the show. And the cool thing was while we were figuring that out, in between that time, I had went out to Scotland to do Edinburgh. This was in
Mm.
2016, and we even though we were on the phone talking, he never seen me in person. He happened to be in Edinburgh, and he didn't tell me. He just came to one of my shows and watched me do an hour set. And after he seen me do the set and do a really good set, he goes,
Uh.
"Yeah, yeah, whatever day. Like we just need to get a day down. It doesn't matter what we were just talking about before. Just go on code. I trust you're gonna do okay." And that's how that unfolded. And we end up doing it in like October or November of 2016.
Wow,
So
that's great.
yeah, 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 it was awesome.
Now you talk about in the special, the hurdles your mom went through,
Yeah.
and thereby the hurdles you went through as well. And how did that shape you as uh, actually just getting through the young years, and how did that help shape your comedy?
Well, I will say this: it didn't help at the time. It didn't help at the time, but
Yeah.
I thought the lazy eye was enough. But it definitely, I guess, exposed me to just a lot of things that probably a lot of kids probably shouldn't see. But it exposed
Mhm.
me to different characters and different like hardships and issues that as far as comedy goes, when I look back on those experiences, like I said, I'm a guy that went through a lot of experiences, unfortunately some of them negative,
Mhm.
which ends up making probably a good sense of humor. Like if you can turn something that was negative into something positive and funny, I think it's comedy gold, really. And when I,
Oh yeah.
but like at the time going through it, it was probably difficult. But there's a lot of things in my life that I could just kind of look back on and be like, oh, I could talk about that and how crazy that was. And now that I'm out of it and I'm looking back at it, and in hindsight, I can kind of put that sense of humor to it. So I think how it might be helpful.
Right. One of the things I didn't start stand up until I was 52, and one of the things I've always said about the advantages of being older and starting is you've already been through shit.
Yeah.
I've had kids. I've buried my best friend. All that kind of stuff has
Mhm.
happened, and
Yeah.
having a bad set is so minuscule in comparison that you're just like, whatever. And
Yeah.
I think maybe the what you went through as a kid
Yeah.
probably gives you that. Um, it really does two things. First off, when you do really well, you don't get so full of yourself that you think you're the greatest thing since sliced bread, and then when you do
Yep.
really bad, you don't think you're that terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that type of comedic suffering that we all go through when it doesn't go well, it doesn't last as long when you've
Mhm.
been through some things in your life, and you also can put it into perspective. So I think you're absolutely right. So yeah, so that in that way, it's helped me as well.
Yeah.
You know, but it
I
still
just
hurts.
Oh, it does. Oh, it does. Yeah, you got. I've always just I let myself be mad about it for 5 minutes, and then I have to go on and get on with my life. But yeah, it does. I just did. I hadn't done any stand up for quite a while, and my first one back was at a bar that I'd never been to. There was a whole group of people I didn't know. And I started talking
Yeah.
to this nutty guy at the bar, and wasn't even thinking about my act. And I went up and just ate shit for 5 minutes, and it was a terrible experience. And then I was like, okay, one, I wasn't prepared. Two, they weren't prepared for me. And
Yep.
and three, I shouldn't drink so much before I go on stage. So
Yeah, you did all the things you shouldn't do, all of them.
yeah.
Hilarious. Yeah.
Now I really, as far as the way the special is put together, I really liked how it really kind of follows a chain of things that are, um, I guess, what made you as a person, and then also a little bit of commentary on, what the world's like when you talk about the school shooting bit. And one of the things that I guess I really took away from that is this is what happens in the world. There's a school shooting, everybody gets up in arms about it, and then nobody talks about it. And
Mm.
in between, all the in between stuff, everybody just kind of forgets about it and goes on. And I thought that what I liked about it was is you brought it up, you didn't make it super heavy, and it was really funny, and yet it I think somebody listening to that could maybe say, you know what? Maybe I won't go shoot up a school today.
Mm.
You know?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, I do think that, like, I mean, obviously it's kind of like a touchy subject, obviously.
Mhm.
And I know some people's feathers a little bit, but I do think it's like a point of view. I do think sometimes, like, people can just get caught up in the emotion of it, like, yeah, just arm all,
Yeah.
and then it's, well, wait, the teacher, if they want to be armed, like, I do
Yeah.
shows all the time, and like 99% of the time, the teachers never raise their hand and say they want to be armed. And it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, because people are just having this reaction because of the incident. So, I was debating on saying this joke, but then I was like, nah, man, like, this is who I am, man. Like, I have to have the ability to, like, say what I think, and because I know there's a take to it that's mine, and it's interesting, and whether you agree with it or not, there's some, like, merit to what I'm saying. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
And there's a twist in there, the hiding part. I'm not gonna go into it in detail, but,
I,
if you don't watch the special for anything else, watch it for the cross-eyed thing and for the hiding during a
yeah,
school shooting
yeah,
thing, because I
yeah.
it was just hilarious.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
That was it was just masterfully written and delivered just perfect. I just love that part. I rewound it a couple times just to, and then you start getting the mental picture, and then you're like, I'm not going to do that anymore.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep, yep. Good, good. Supposed to do, man. Make you
Yeah,
laugh
yeah,
and think a little bit. Make you laugh and
yeah,
think a little bit. I try
yeah.
to do that.
I really liked it. So the intention behind the special, can you go into why you wanted to do this?
Yeah, there's several reasons. I do feel like, I was ready to, like, unleash this material that I kind of been doing bits and pieces of it on, a little bit on Conan, a little bit in Dry Bar, but I do feel like sometimes when you're doing shorter sets, it's not a complete set. Like, it's either you're sacrificing who you are a little bit, or because you're focused just on the jokes, and the jokes are kind of like out of context, and, like, there's things you might have to leave out. And I felt like, since the Netflix wasn't knocking on my door, um, they weren't knocking on my door, and I felt like, you know, I perform all over the country, and performed internationally, and a lot of people seem to like the jokes, and I'm like, why am I waiting for somebody to do something that I can do myself?
Mhm.
And I felt like, especially, like, during this time, because it's like there's a lot of teacher material, and um, it really focuses on, like, a lot of themes in it, like school, the impact of teachers, the impact of students on you as educators.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that, during this school year, where a lot of teachers came back to school after a year of remote teaching, a lot of teachers were kind of, like, depressed.
Yeah.
Like, the stress has been on a very all-time high. Like, teachers are like, well, we're worried about our safety, and then people are like, I don't care. You guys got to come back, right? And you got to think, you have kids that were in the seventh grade when this whole thing started that are now freshmen, and they're
Yeah.
around. See, just imagine that transition, and then being the teacher that has to deal with these kids that are, their last time that was in a classroom was seventh grade. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So I felt like that's why I kind of wanted to do it in a school, and I wanted to do it at my school because, like I said, personally, it has, a lot of meaning and significance to me. And
Mhm.
then, as you notice in the crowd, there's a lot of teachers that were at the school, so it was like I was doing them a favor as well, because they were like, this was like relief for them, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So that's kind of why I wanted to do it, man. Like, and now it's dropping, you know, I don't know if you know this, Scott, but Teacher Appreciation Week starts today. It's
Oh,
like,
great.
yeah, it's May 2nd through the 7th, and my special is dropping on May 6th because I wanted to give them a gift other than stale cookies and donuts and coffee that administrator is going to give them, or thank you cards with thank you spelled incorrectly
Right.
by one of this. It's so
One of the things that I know, because I know teachers personally, is the stress never went away, because you had the stress of trying to do the remote learning, and nobody was happy with it. The kids weren't happy, the parents weren't happy, the teachers weren't happy, and you're always trying to adjust. And
yeah.
then you try to, then they bring the kids back for a little bit, then they take them back out, and then you're dumped into it full time. And I know that I just know that a lot of these kids spent all the time that they weren't able to go to school, like playing video games and stuff.
Oh
And
yeah.
so they weren't like you said, a seventh grader that's now a freshman is still at the maturity level in some ways of that seventh grader, because they haven't been social.
Yeah, they haven't exactly. So them going back to school, even for them, has to be like, oh my God, I'm around other kids again, finally.
Yeah.
So how you know, if it was distracting before, imagine how distracting it had to be now that you have all these kids that are like just excited. They're not excited to be probably doing schoolwork again, but they're
Hmm.
excited to see their friends. They want to. So it's going to be a lot harder for teachers to get everybody's attention. And then, you know, I mean, I don't envy being a teacher after a year of remote learning. So hats off to every teacher that's out there that's sticking with it and doing it. And you know, a lot. I don't think people really understand that, you know, how that impacts the morale of a lot of teachers as
Yeah.
well. You know.
And you used to think that the grade school teachers had it easy, and they've got it just as tough as the high school.
Oh, so yeah. That's. I mean, any teacher at any level. I mean, just dealing with that many kids and different personalities, in addition to the expectations that administration has on you, in terms of like lesson plans and curriculum and doing your job, and then throwing parents on top of that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easily one of the most difficult jobs a person can ever do. People
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
realize how emotionally draining it is.
Yeah. I agree. As far as, so you've been doing this a long enough time that you kind of know who you are, but as far as advice you've gotten along the way, do you have any pieces of advice that, first of all, was the worst advice you ever got and you acted on it and found out it was terrible, or the best advice you ever got?
I think I don't know if it's the best advice. I remember when I was to maybe a year into stand up. There was this comedian who I will not mention, more veteran comedian. And do you have any advice for an up and coming comic? And he looked at me and he said, yeah, talk to me in 5 years.
Uh,
Walked away. And I'm thinking to myself, how rude of you. You know what I mean? You're not even big time. What are you talking about? That's rude.
yeah.
And then, you know, after doing it for a number of years, I kind of maybe look at it a little bit now. Not saying he handled it correctly, but I do understand the point. And there's a lot of people that don't last long in stand up,
Mhm.
and they want you to give them all this working for it, really dedicated to it. And yeah, you know, like 5 years, doing it for 5 years is a good amount of time. You know,
Yeah.
what I learned is you sacrifice a lot in comedy, whether you realize it or
Yeah.
not, whether it could just be your weekends or your time with your friends. And You'll start noticing it when people stop inviting you to things because they think you're out doing stand up somewhere.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's kind of sometimes it becomes kind of difficult to socialize with people that are not comedians that kind of don't know your life. But I guess the best advice I ever got was, you just keep getting up on stage. If you don't pick it up, you don't have to put it down. Somebody said, Maya Angelou. I heard that quote from Maya Angelou. It wasn't necessarily a comedic quote, but it's something that you said a little bit earlier in the sense of, as like not to get too high off the applause and not to get too low off the down nights. And I think it's the same thing. Like if you don't pick up all the praise, you don't have to put it down. You know what I mean? Like, so when you get all the bad, the negative criticism, so you just try to remain neutral and focus. For me, I feel like focus on your own. Everybody has their own plan, and you can't worry about anybody else, and just kind of do your thing and, see what happens from there.
Now, I see that you're touring very, very regularly right
Mhm.
now, and you're very busy. How do you feel the audiences are now versus pre-pandemic?
I mean, I think they're good, to be honest with you. I thought they were a little bit more sensitive before the pandemic,
Mhm.
Trump days when everything political was kind of like uh, it was almost like a death wish for a comedian to get up
Yeah.
and talk politics. Um, so I think now that people are getting out again after having their entertainment and freedom and places to go taken away, I think now they're kind of like excited to be back, and there's that buzz in the atmosphere again. And but it's still like we'll see how long that lasts. But I
Yeah.
feel like I feel like people are pretty excited to be out.
Yeah.
Everybody's kind of like tired of this pandemic.
Yeah, and I'm getting almost everybody I talk to says about the same thing, that it's really great energy and it's easier to fill a room. The tickets are selling earlier instead of
Yeah,
trying to get half the seats filled the day before and all that kind of stuff, and everybody's just waiting for the hammer to drop, and then all of
yeah.
a sudden nobody cares anymore. But I think that they appreciate it enough now that folks are going to get out and do it more. I'm at least hopeful.
Yeah. I think so. Like based on my time so far, people are definitely coming out. They're definitely
Y-
coming out.
Yeah. So as far as the special's coming out on May 6th,
Yes.
and this is Teacher Appreciation Week, so perfect timing for it.
Yep.
And what else do you have going on, and how can people find you?
People can find me by going to my website at orlandobaxter.com, um, signing up for the mailing list, whether I'm either in your area or you just want the monthly to see all the things I got going on.
Mhm.
But as far as the specials, like the big thing, the album will follow that shortly. And people will be able to watch that or listen to it on series, hopefully, series radio. And I got a podcast. I don't want to announce the name yet, but please
Okay.
sign up and you'll hear about that. But yeah, the podcast, I'm very excited about that. But my focus is on the special right now.
Yeah.
But within the next month, I'll be promoting the podcast, and hopefully people like that.
Yeah. I didn't ask you this earlier, but how much do you do as far as social media? Are you like really into it, or do you just have somebody doing it for you?
No, I don't have anyone doing it for me, and I'm not really into it. So
Okay.
it's
Good for you.
yeah. I mean, it's very hard, but I know it's not my thing. I didn't come into comedy, but I think that's the way I need to go, and so I'll be 100% putting up more content, um, and hoping people get a chance to see me, and I really hope that when people watch the special, they'll get a sense of who I am, a sense of my humor, and they'll decide to like follow me and hear more because I got
Yeah.
more. You know.
And it's okay to put stuff up, but when they expect you to be a content creator and all this original
Yeah.
stuff and stuff, if you put your mind on that and then on the business of comedy, then all of a sudden the writing starts going downhill because you're not
Yeah.
concentrating on that, and then if you concentrate on this, then that goes down. It's amazing what you have to juggle to try to get your name out there anymore. It's just nuts.
Yeah, yeah, it's very hard. It's not something that hey, if I ever get big enough, then I'm definitely gonna have somebody handle all that because I'm not doing it.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, like I said, your special is something that I'm going to watch over and over again, just because the pacing. If
Yeah.
I could just, if I could be, I don't know, 10% of the pacing that you have, then I think I'd probably be a 100% better comedian. So I really, really enjoyed
Oh,
that, and
thank you, man.
your writing's just great. I mean, you're very unique, and I mean, you talked about Richard Pryor. You do remind me of him as far as telling the true story tales and stuff like that. And I think he wrote a lot like you too, because a lot of the folks I talked to from the comedy store said that he just used to go up and do an hour and it was awful.
Yeah.
And then he'd do it again and it was a little bit better. And then by the time he did it like the 20th time, then he'd tour with it and then he'd do the special and then he would just come back and do it again.
Yeah, see that and that, yeah, that I mean, that's kind of the philosophy I'm kind of following. I mean, it works for me. If I find a better way to write and to write more, 100% I would do that. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um, right now this is what's working for me, so that's what I'm gonna roll with.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad we met. Thanks for being on the show, Orlando.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Scott. I really enjoyed myself.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, now if we could just do one thing. This is the part where you um uh tell me what an awful podcaster I
Yeah.
am in your own words.
Yeah.
So we're just casual now. We're just casual.
Okay.
Um Orlando, how'd you like the podcast?
Bro, this was I don't even know how to hold on. I got to throw up. This was terrible,
Really?
bro. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've never thrown up from a podcast. This this
Uh-huh.
this this was very difficult to do. And
Okay. Okay.
I I owe it all to you.
Okay, okay, I was glad I was there to, just really screw up an hour of your life.
Yeah, hold on a second.
Are you
All
better?
right. Now that it's about to be over, I think I am getting better.
Okay.
But
Well, thank you so much, Orlando. That was great, thank you.
all right, peace.
Let me get off the